Hey guys! Tonight we begin with the surprisingly structured, brutally honest, and often misunderstood life of a medieval prostitute. A woman who contributed to the economy in very practical ways. Her world was a quiet web of daily rituals, worn paths between narrow streets, and the soft hum of human activity that never really slept. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that tea, soft background hum. Let it blend with the quiet sounds in your own room, settling you into stillness. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the gentle sound of someone retching in the alley below your window. The noise softened by the morning air, but still carrying a damp, sour tang that seeps upward. The window, which is actually more of a hole in the wall with cloth nailed over it, stirs faintly with the draft. A coarse fabric brushing lightly against the wall as it sways. Because glass is for churches and people who get paid more than 4 copper coins a night, the room, generously referred to as a chamber, measures roughly the size of a pig pen. Coincidentally, it smells like one too, with a mix of stale straw, old sweat, and the faint musk of damp timber. The walls are timber, stained and bowed in a way that makes you wonder if the building itself has given up. The wood feels tired, its grain darkened with decades of smoke and spilled ale. The roof leaks when it rains, groans when it doesn't, as if adjusting its weight with each change of weather. And one of the floorboards moves with a worrying squelch, hinting at something wet and unwelcome beneath. You stopped asking why months ago. Your mattress is a lumpy sack of straw stuffed with dreams, back pain, and the occasional flea with a drinking problem. The straw has a sharp, dusty scent, and the coarse fabric rubs faintly against your skin when you move. You shift. Something crunches beneath you. You tell yourself it's just an almond from last week's festival that you didn't attend, perhaps rolling there from someone else's celebration. There's no pillow, just a bundle of rags that may once have been a tunic, the cloth thin and cool against your cheek. You curl it under your neck, scratch at a bite on your arm, and stare at the ceiling beam with the faint hope that today won't involve a friar with a foot fetish and poor hygiene. The beam's surface is uneven, speckled with tiny cobwebs that stir gently when the air moves. You say a quick prayer to St. Mary Magdalene, patroness of your profession, sort of. The prayer is whispered into the quiet, blending with the distant creak of the building. And throw off your blanket. It's damp. It always is, holding the faint, earthy smell of the river water used to wash it last. Across the narrow hall, you hear Gertrude finishing her shift. She giggles, the sound breaking into a cough, then mutters something about rats, her voice low and hoarse from a long night. She's been here longer than you, and claims she once bedded a nobleman. No one believes her, but we all appreciate the optimism. Her stories add a bit of sparkle to mornings otherwise weighed down by routine. The madam's footsteps creak on the stairs. You tense. The boards moan under her weight, each step slow and deliberate. She's holding her ledger and shouting about unpaid fees, torn linens, and someone using the good honey soap. Her voice sharp but familiar, echoing slightly off the low ceiling. Again, you get up quickly. You splash some water on your face. Droplets run down your cheeks in thin, cold rivulets, sliding along your jaw before soaking into the frayed collar of your shift. It's cold enough to remind you you're alive, but not enough to make you feel clean. Just enough to wake the skin in a sharp, bracing tingle. The air smells faintly of damp wood and last night's candle smoke, clinging to the rough walls. You sigh, straighten your back, and mutter, "Another glorious day in paradise." Your breath leaving a faint mist in the chill. And with that, your shift begins. You begin your day the way any professional would, trying to remember if that stain on your shift dress is wine, blood, or last night's stew. The fabric is stiff where the mark has dried. You sniff it, you regret it. It's stew, probably. There's a cracked ceramic basin in the corner of your room, filled with water that's been sitting overnight, its surface trembling slightly with each creak of the floor, just long enough to be freezing, but not long enough to grow something. You splash it on your face, the shock travelling through your fingers and into your bones. It's an instant cure for sleepiness and a reminder that plumbing is something future people will brag about. The faint mineral tang of the water lingers on your lips. You reach for a sliver of soap. It's not there. You curse Gertrude again. She's known for borrowing personal items without hygiene is optional. Odor is inevitable. The scent of boiled cabbage from downstairs mingles with something sour and metallic that's been trapped in the walls for years. Your hair is a mess. That's actually a compliment. Tangled strands catch in your fingers, which are raw from scrubbing linens last night, the knuckles pink and chapped. You comb it with your fingers anyway, working through knots with small, deliberate tugs, and tie it back with a ribbon that used to be white before life happened to it. The ribbon feels limp, its edges frayed into little threads. You think about putting on makeup, a dab of rouge, maybe some ash to contour your cheekbones, but decide that a tired look is in this season, especially if the client's too drunk to notice. Dressing is simple. You wear the uniform required by city ordinance, a faded red, scene gown that loudly announces, "I am both available and taxable." The fabric is coarse and thin in places, the colour dulled to the shade of dried brick dust. It's a shade of red that says passion, penance, and legally sanctioned shame all at once. You slide on your shoes mismatched, cracked, and blessedly yours. The leather stiff, but molded to your feet from years of wear. As you step into the hallway, the air smells like boiled cabbage and bad decisions. A mix so heavy, it clings to the back of your throat. Downstairs, you can already hear the madam shouting about unpaid debts and a misplaced loot. The sound echoes off the narrow walls, each word bouncing up the staircase. You don't ask. Before heading down, you do a quick check in the mirror. Well, the shiny piece of metal nailed to the wall. The metal is dull and spotted with age, warped just enough to bend your reflection into strange shapes. You smile. It's good enough. You've perfected the art of looking interested while dissociating. A gaze that drifts just past the person in front of you. Eyes soft but steady. A faint curl to your lips. It's your most marketable skill. And as you descend the stairs, the boards creak under your weight. Dust rising in thin wisps with each step. You're greeted by the scent of cheap ale soaked into the walls. The sound of boots stomping mud onto the floorboards in a slow, heavy rhythm, and the unmistakable feeling that someone has already vomited in the fireplace. The sour tang of it, faint but unmistakable under the smoke. Welcome to Monday. Your first client of the day arrives just after the church bells finish ringing prime. Their deep, solemn tone, eager, and smells strongly of flour and someone who sweats professionally. A yeasty, warm scent clinging to his clothes. You recognize him. He's the baker from 2 streets over. Middle-aged, married, and always convinced he's your favorite. He greets you with a crooked grin that tilts more to one side, and a fresh loaf of bread still giving off a faint, inviting steam, as if carbohydrates count as currency. Technically, the madame accepts bread. Technically, she's also been eating it in secret and telling everyone your wages are behind again. Her lips shiny with crumbs as she scolds. You usher him into your chamber, which is still airing out from last night's vinegar rinse. The sharp, sour scent mingling faintly with the dry mustiness of the straw mattress. Compliments your hair, which is greasy but soft in the way unwashed hair sometimes is. Your skin, which is blotchy with patches of pink from the morning's cold water. And your dress, which is regulation issue and smells faintly of boiled onions from the communal kitchen downstairs. You thank him anyway, the words warm and smooth on your tongue. Flattery is the real currency here. He undresses with the urgency of someone trying to win a race no one else signed up for. Movements quick and slightly clumsy. His tunic hits the floor in a soft, dusty puff. His hose sag depressingly, the fabric wrinkled and thin at the knees. He asks if you remember him from last week. You lie and say yes. He beams. You go through the usual motions. Impressive. He lasts about the time it takes a monk to light a candle, then flops over, out of breath and full of compliments, his chest rising and falling in quick bursts. You smile professionally, like a saint who's seen things and no longer flinches, your expression serene and unreadable. He lingers, talks about his wife, says she doesn't understand him. You nod sympathetically, eyes flicking briefly to the bread, calculating whether the crust will still be soft by evening. Before he leaves, he places the loaf gently on your table, like a man offering treasure, his fingertips lingering on it, as if reluctant to let go. It's warm. You can't be mad. Bread is bread, and you haven't had warm anything since last feast day, when the kitchen fire was stoked high and the air smelled of roasting meat. Once he's gone, you check the coin pouch he left. 2 pennies short again, the coins clinking lightly as they slide into your palm. You sigh, pocket it, and make a mental note to add it to your growing tab. You consider nibbling the bread now, its warmth still tempting through the crust, but decide to wait. If your next client doesn't show up, it'll be your consolation prize. You fluff the straw-stuffed mattress. Morning rush. With the baker gone and your dignity mostly intact, you head downstairs for breakfast, or as it's known in the brothel, whatever hasn't been stolen yet. The communal table is already surrounded by the rest of the girls, all in various states of disrepair, their gowns rumpled, hair loose, eyes still heavy from the night before. Marjorie is picking straw out of her hair, each piece falling to the floor like dry chaff. Beatrice is icing a mystery bruise with a cabbage leaf, the pale green veins of it pressed cool against her skin. Gertrude, as usual, looks far too pleased with herself, which probably means someone important paid her an actual coin, the glint of it no doubt hidden somewhere in her bodice. You slide into your spot, eyeing the blank. Breakfast offerings. A wooden plate with stale bread crusts, the edges hard and pale as if they've been sitting for days. A chunk of yellow cheese that's sweating profusely, despite the weather. The beads of oil glistening under the dim morning light, and half a boiled onion whose scent has already claimed the space around it. There's also a communal mug of watered-down ale. It's lukewarm and cloudy, like the future, with a faint, yeasty tang rising from the rim. You break off a bit of bread and try not to chip a tooth, the dry crust grinding audibly between your teeth. Marjorie passes the ale mug. You hesitate. She had that cough last week, the one that sounded suspiciously like plague, a deep, rattling thing that lingered in the chest, but you drink anyway. The ale is flat, faintly sour, and warm where it should be crisp. It's that, or eat the onion raw, and you still have clients. Scheduled. The conversation at the table flows like the river Thames. Slow, filthy, and full of odd things floating in it. Gertrude is gossiping loudly about a knight who cried during the act and asked to be held, her voice lilting like she's telling a bedtime story rather than a sordid confession. Beatrice claims she saw the mayor's wife sneaking out the back door last night, her tone casual, as if it's just another scrap of daily news. No one questions it. No one really wants to know. The madam appears suddenly like a tax collector in the fog, her presence thick and inescapable, the air seeming to tighten around her. She eyes the bread, snatches the last edible bit for herself, and announces that the city inspector will be coming by this week. Groans echo around the table, low and overlapping, like a choir that's given up on harmony. This means scrubbing, actual mending, and pretending the walls haven't started growing things. Faint blooms of damp that creep upward in pale green and black patterns. You eye the leftover crust and slip it into your sleeve for later, the sharp edge pressing lightly against your wrist. Desperation makes excellent Tupperware. Just as you're starting to enjoy the cheese, possibly mold, possibly seasoning, the bell above the door rings, the sound sharp and tinny, cutting through the warm fog of the kitchen. A new customer, of course. You chew quickly, swallow even quicker, and adjust your dress so it looks less like you slept in it, which you did. The day has barely begun, and already you're rationing crumbs and contemplating your life choices. And you haven't even seen the priest yet. You're halfway through adjusting your corset with one hand, tugging the stays into place until the fabric bites a little into your ribs, and fishing breadcrumbs out of your sleeve with the other, the crust breaking into smaller, stubborn pieces. When Gertrude lets out the dramatic sigh and announces to the room, well, it's back, her tone is the same one she uses when speaking of royal scandals. Everyone freezes. Marjorie chokes slightly on her onion, the sound wet and abrupt. Beatrice mutters, "Third time this season," without looking up from her stitching, the needle still dipping and rising with mechanical steadiness. The itch. Gertrude continues, placing one hand on her hip and the other on her dramatically exposed collarbone, tilting her chin just so, as though a painter might walk in and immortalize her in that exact pose. It's come back with a vengeance, like an angry ex-boyfriend, armed with a torch and a confession. No one is particularly shocked. Gertrude is a walking cautionary tale, wrapped in rouge and bad decision-making. The powder on her cheeks is cracked at the edges, the red on her lips slightly smudged. She insists it's from the foreign merchant she entertained last week, the one with the fur-trimmed boots and questionable jewellery that clinked when he moved. You strongly suspect it was the town scribe, his ink-stained fingers and nervous eyes far more likely culprits. Again, the madam appears in the doorway, holding her ever-growing debt ledger. The cracked leather cover, swollen from years of stuffed pages, and what may or may not be a bottle of vinegar. The vinegar's sharp scent cuts through the room, even from where you sit, catching in your throat. Scrubbing stations are open, she declares, gesturing toward a battered tin basin, dented and warped, and a rag that's seen things no rag should ever see. Its fibers stiff with old stains, edges frayed into lace-like tatters. Gertrude struts over like she's on parade, hips swaying, and plops herself down with the grace of someone who's absolutely not worried about her pelvic reputation. Honestly, she says to no one, at least it's not the pox. That time with the nobleman. Face like a statue, touched like a rash. Her voice is dry, but the smirk stays. Marjorie passes her a clove of garlic. For healing, she mutters, though everyone knows it's just an excuse to mask the smell. The bulb releasing its pungent oil under the warmth of her palm. You wisely keep your distance and try not to make eye contact with the vinegar jug, its cloudy contents swirling as it's moved. You've been lucky so far, or selective, or both. Conversation continues over the sound of splashing, the rag hitting skin with a wet slap, and Gertrude humming something disturbingly cheerful, her tune weaving in and out of key. Someone brings up the rumour that a new brothel is opening near the docks, with real curtains. Beatrice whispers, eyes wide, her voice almost reverent. You all take a moment to dream. Curtains. Beds with mattresses thicker than a pie crust. The imagined weight of them makes your back ache with longing. Clients who don't fall asleep mid-sentence. Then reality returns, settling over you like dust. Gertrude yelps loudly as the vinegar hits its mark, the sharp tang rising stronger in the air. You whisper, the madam rolls her eyes, the sound of her breath sharp through her nose. And somewhere in the distance a church bell tolls, low, deliberate, because apparently even God is keeping score today. You grab your pouch, sigh deeply, and prepare for your next client. Preferably one without jewellery, the clinking kind that leaves marks. Just as you're contemplating a quiet moment to yourself. Maybe a nap, a secret nibble of that crust from earlier. The front door cacks open, the hinges groaning in protest, and in walks the bishop's nephew. He always arrives the same way, nervously, shoulders drawn in, clutching a flask of sacramental wine so tightly the skin of his knuckles goes pale, and with the kind of guilty expression usually reserved for tax collectors and dogs that just ate the roast. He's dressed in clerical grey with a hood too big for his head, the fabric shadowing his face, and shame leaking out of every pore. Peace be with you, he mumbles, because he thinks that makes it more appropriate. And also, with your coin? You reply, smiling sweetly, your voice low enough to be private. He insists, as usual, that he's only here for confession. You nod like you haven't heard that 12 times before. The motion slow and practiced. His version of confession involves wine, trembling hands that leave damp marks where they rest, and some rather confused theology about Eve, temptation, and something involving goats that you've never fully understood and are too polite to ask. He always brings a gift. Today, it's dried figs wrapped in linen. The cloth faintly perfumed from wherever it was stored, and a half-hearted poem about salvation. The ink smudged in places as if written in haste. You accept both graciously. You are, after all, a woman of etiquette. You guide him to the back room, the floorboards creaking beneath your measured steps. He asks if you've been praying for him. You tell him yes. You don't mention it was mostly praying he wouldn't come back. The act itself is a ritual, overly apologetic, surprisingly fast, and punctuated by him declaring he'll never return, which he always does, usually within 3 days. Afterward, must stay hydrated. He tries to pay you in silver, but the madam only accepts coin from him in person. Something about unpaid dues and ecclesiastical immunity. Instead, he leaves the figs, their sweet scent faint but pleasant, another prayer, and a small wooden cross worn smooth from handling. May God forgive us, he whispers at the door. You nod. He has good reason to at this point. As he exits, he bumps into Gertrude, who winks at him, her lashes slow and deliberate. He stumbles, blushes, and bolts like he's just seen a demon in fishnet stockings. You tuck the figs away for later. They're probably stale, but they're not mouldy, and that's a win. The crust is hard but still holds the faintest memory of warmth if you press it to your cheek. Now, time to air the room and find where you put that garlic clove. The merchant from last night mentioned coming back, and you have a feeling he's bringing feathers. After the bishop's nephew flees the premises like he's late for Judgment Day, the door swinging closed behind him with a protesting groan, you finally get a moment to sit down. You settle by the hearth with your lukewarm ale, the mug rough in your hands. Stretch your aching feet toward the cooling embers and begin to seriously consider stealing Marjorie's garlic clove for your own defense. That's when Beatrice bursts in, skirts swishing, holding a folded piece of parchment like it's the Magna Carta. It's for you, she smirks, waving it dramatically, the corners of the paper fluttering. From your secret admirer. The word secret is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. There are only 6 men in town who can write, and 4 of them are married. 1 is the bishop. The last one is the town scribe, a man who once tried to impress you by reciting Latin and nearly fell into a chicken coop, the flapping and squawking drowning out the last of his conjugations. You unfold the parchment with the enthusiasm of someone unwrapping spoiled fish. It's written in what appears to be ink, though it could also be beet juice, the faint, earthy smell giving nothing away, and the handwriting is ambitious. Some of the letters are backwards. Some may not be letters at all, curling into shapes like drunken insects. You begin to read aloud. O fairest flame, thy hair is red like stew at night when all are fed. I dream of thee by candle's light. Though rats do squeak and bites do bite. There's a pause. Beatrice wipes, hoping there's a punchline. There isn't, just a crude drawing of what might be a heart or a potato with arrows. The lines uneven, as if drawn in haste. The poem is signed only Your Knight of Quills, which sounds poetic until you remember the scribe once stabbed himself in the hand trying to sharpen a feather. The blood drops staining the page like punctuation. Maybe he means well, Marjorie offers, peeking over your shoulder, her breath warm on your ear. Maybe he's just deeply, profoundly bad at this. You consider keeping the poem, then consider using it to start the fire. In the end, you fold it neatly and shove it into the hearth. It catches quickly, curling in on itself, the flames licking greedily at the edges. Like most things in your life, it's briefly bright, then vanishes into smoke. Still, part of you finds it charming. Not the poem, that was objectively terrible, but the idea that someone thought of you outside of business hours. You stare at the fire a little longer, the embers shifting from orange to deep red. They only mean one thing. A merchant has arrived. He's dressed in velvet that's seen better decades, the pile worn flat at the elbows, jingling with trinkets that scream midlife crisis by sea route. His beard is oiled, catching the light, his hat unnecessary, perched like a boast, and his gaze lingers far too long on the chandelier that isn't there. He claims to have been everywhere, Alexandria, Genoa, even Paris, which he pronounces as if it were a type of meat. His boots are muddy, the dried crust cracking with each step. His teeth are suspiciously white, and he smells like someone who bathes in perfume to mask something more offensive. He does not ask for company. He demands an experience. The word he uses is exotic. He doesn't elaborate. They never do. Surprise me, he says, which in your line of work ranks somewhere between a warning and a dare. You lead him to the back room that still faintly smells of incense from the bishop's nephew, and begin your mental inventory. There are a few props in the trunk, feathers, a cracked mask, one scarf that's barely held together by hope. Nothing screams exotic. Most of it barely whispers. Functional. So you improvise. You throw on the scarf as a veil, the weave scratchy against your cheeks. Add the cracked mask for mystique, its flaking paint faintly gritty under your fingers. Light a candle, its wick sputtering before catching. You chant a nonsense phrase you once heard a drunk Hungarian say at a fair. It worked on a night once. He thought it was pagan. The merchant claps, delighted, rings on his fingers clicking together. You haven't even done anything yet. He asks to be tied up. You comply. He requests honey. You offer molasses. He doesn't notice. He mumbles something about forbidden fruit while you try not to laugh. He accidentally knocks over the chamber pot. During the theatrics, the splash immediate and unwelcome, but considers it part of the ritual. The entire encounter is less passion and more performance art. When it's done, he tips generously. Gold, not silver, which means you'll finally get a full meal that doesn't involve turnips. He bows, mutters something about spiritual awakening, and leaves with your cracked mask as a souvenir. Its absence leaving a lighter space in the trunk. You stare at the door for a moment, then turn back to the spilled chamber pot and the slowly extinguishing candle. Exotic indeed. By now, the sun is limping its way down. The sky, its light turning the rooftops a muted copper. And with it comes the unmistakable stench of the tannery next door. A thick, pungent blend of rotting flesh, urine, and crushed dreams. It's as if the air itself decided to give up and embrace decay. The tanning pits are only separated from your establishment by a shared alley and a moral boundary that's just as flimsy. You've grown used to it mostly. The smell settles on your skin like guilt, clinging stubbornly. No amount of lavender sprigs stuffed into your bodice can defeat it. Inside, things aren't much fresher. The common room reeks of sweat, spilled ale, and the kind of despair that can only be mopped up with hot vinegar and divine intervention. The air is heavy and sticky, clinging to your skin. Gertrude is snoring on a bench, her head tilted back at an angle that suggests she's long since stopped caring. Beatrice is plucking lice from her bodice with the focus of a monk copying scripture, her fingertips moving with slow, deliberate precision. Marjorie is cleaning her teeth with the end of a quill, scraping lightly along the edge of a molar. The quill might belong to your admirer. You don't ask. You return to your room, step over a puddle that might be water, probably not, and collapse onto the straw mattress, which groans louder than the client's. The straw shifts beneath you, releasing a dry, dusty scent mixed with something faintly sour. For a brief moment, you let yourself think, not about the day or the coins you've earned or the molasses still in your hair. You think about what you'll eat tonight. Bread if the rats haven't claimed it. Maybe a boiled root, its flavour bland, but at least filling. You consider heating water for tea, imagining the steam on your face. Then remember, you used the last of the firewood 2 nights ago during an overly ambitious bath attempt. The walls are thin enough that the grain of the wood shows through the old plaster, and you can hear next door's conversation through them. A merchant arguing with a washerwoman about goats or maybe debts, possibly both. The words rise and fall in sharp bursts, punctuated by the slap of a hand on a table. A dog barks in the distance, the sound echoing faintly through the narrow streets. Then someone retches below your window, the retching wet and miserable. You wonder if it's the bishop's nephew again. You light a tallow candle and hold your fingers close to it, the flickering heat prickling your skin. Not for romance, but for warmth. Outside, the sky turns that bruised purple colour, but always the sound of several joints giving up, the cracks loud in the quiet. You reach for the wine-stained bodice, the fabric stiff in spots where the spill dried. Showtime again. Night in a medieval brothel is when things truly come alive. By which we mean louder, stickier, and far more likely to result in someone throwing up on your shoes. The alehouse down the lane has just spilled its contents into the streets. Mostly drunk men, one bewildered goat, and a lute player with a black eye. They stagger toward your door, like moths to a flame. If moths wore half-buttoned tunics and smelled like week-old onions. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the faint whiff of burning something. Could be a candle, could be dinner. Either way, no one's checking. The madam is in full bark mode, her voice carrying over the noise, directing traffic like a general on the losing side of a war. Gertrude has smeared more rouge on her cheeks than a noblewoman's corpse, the colour uneven but bold. Beatrice is passed out with her eyes open, an impressive skill that makes her look faintly possessed. And you're at your post near the stairs, pretending to look mysterious instead of exhausted, your hands resting lightly on the banister. The clientele tonight is a glorious disaster. There's the toothless cooper, who insists on singing before anything else, his voice cracked and tuneless. The apprentice mason, who wants to practice kissing like the nobles do, which mostly involves drooling and apologising between attempts. And of course, the guy who paid with a chicken last time and is back to negotiate with eggs, cradling them in his hands like fragile jewels. You manage to avoid the worst of them, barely, and end up entertaining a blacksmith who has muscles, manners, and the emotional depth of a door. Still, he pays up front and doesn't talk much. A win by local standards. The room is already hot when you lead him up the stairs, the candlelight trembling against the walls. The mattress sags when you sit, the straw crunching faintly beneath the fabric, and you mentally check out somewhere between boot removal and awkward compliments. Afterwards, he falls asleep instantly, his breathing heavy and uneven. You nudge him with your toe. Nothing. He snores like a dying ox. You consider robbing him for sport, but settle for fishing out the rest of the coin and leaving before he rolls over and breaks your ribs. Downstairs, the music has turned to shouting, the sharp edges of voices cutting through the smoky air. Someone's playing dice with the madam's rent. Money. A fight breaks out over who gets the clean goblet. There isn't one. You take a breath, then cough as the haze in the room catches in your throat, and the night's just getting started. Just when you think the night has peaked, after the vomiting, the loop string snapping, and the guy who thought tipping was optional if he winked, in walks a knight, or at least someone claiming to be one. His armor is mostly rust, the hinges stiff and squeaking. His helmet is missing, and he smells like he lost a joust to a pigsty. He's got a sword, though. It's dull, decorative, and possibly wooden. But he drags it behind him with all the gravitas of a man who definitely talks to it when no one's around. The tip scraping along the warped floorboards with a slow, metallic rasp. He slams a coin purse on the counter, the dull clink of mismatched coins spilling within, and proclaims he wants to rescue a maiden. The madam, without missing a beat, points at you. You don't even blink. This isn't the weirdest request you've had this week. That honor still belongs to the beekeeper who wanted to be stung emotionally. You lead him upstairs, the stairwell smelling faintly of candle soot and wet wool. He insists on taking the stairs valiantly, which involves tripping twice and reciting half of a poem that might be about horses, the rhythm breaking every time he catches himself on the banister. You nod politely, wondering if there's a saint for patience in this line of work. Inside the room, he demands a damsel in distress scenario. You oblige, sighing dramatically and pretending to be imprisoned in the corner, the flicker of the candle stretching your shadow high against the wall. He insists on saving you by kicking over a stool and declaring victory. The stool rolling lazily to a stop. You clap. He bows. The show continues. Then comes the role play. He requests you call him Sir Gilbert the Moist, which you manage with a straight face only because you once had to call someone Captain Nipplehorn for 20 minutes. He recites more poetry, terrible naturally, and insists on being gentle, despite your insistence that speed and silence are virtues at this hour. Eventually, things proceed. He's surprisingly nervous. You guide him gently, like one might guide a lost sheep or a confused town official, adjusting your movements to keep him from tangling himself in the sheet. Afterwards, he hands you a gold coin and a small pouch of herbs from his quest. You're 80% sure it's dried grass, the brittle stems poking through the fabric. He bows deeply and exits with a flourish, tripping one final time on the curtain. You sit for a moment in silence, then burst out laughing, the sound bouncing lightly off the low ceiling. Sometimes absurdity is the only thing standing between exhaustion and existential dread. You pocket the coin and toss the herbs out the window, watching them scatter into the night air. The noise has finally begun to die down. The lute player's passed out with his instrument cradled like a child, his fingers still curled on the strings, Gertrude is face down on the hearth rug, possibly dreaming of bishops. Beatrice is upright, but definitely unconscious, her head tilting ever so slightly with each breath. The madam is counting coins and muttering curses in 3 languages. You recognize at least 2, the sharp consonants like thrown pebbles. Your room is quiet now, save for the rhythmic drip from a leak in the ceiling and the occasional creak of you light what's left of your last candle, a stub that smells vaguely of animal fat and desperation, and set it on the table, the light trembling in the draught. The floor is cold, your feet are sore. You remove your bodice with the delicacy of someone defusing a bomb, unhooking it carefully so it doesn't snag on the stitching, and collapse onto the straw mattress that has now become your closest friend and worst enemy. Just as your eyes begin to close, there's a sound. A tiny squeak, followed by another. Rats again. You sit up with the speed of a crusader hearing the word relic. 2 beady eyes reflect the candlelight from under your trunk. Bold little devils. The one on the left has a scar. You've named him Robert. He's practically a tenant at this point. You toss a stale crust in the opposite direction, and Robert scurries after it, dragging his tiny pride with him. His friend follows, nails clicking faintly on the boards. You make a note to set another vinegar trap tomorrow, knowing full well it'll fail like all the others. Downstairs, someone groans, then silence. You lean against the wall and exhale slowly. You're bone tired. Your hair smells like smoke. Your back feels like it's 300 years old. And your soul, well, it left about 4 clients ago. And yet, there's a strange calm in this hour. The clients are gone. The madness paused. The city outside is dark and still, like the world's holding its breath. Your body gives out before your mind finishes listing everything that aches. Your dreams, as always, are absurd. You're in a castle, somehow clean, wrapped in silk, and reclining on a bed that doesn't crunch when you move. There are grapes. There's music. A man with all his teeth is reciting poetry that doesn't rhyme love with dove. You sip wine that doesn't taste like boiled socks. It's bliss. And then, naturally, someone starts screaming. You jolt awake, smacking your head against the low beam above your straw mattress, the impact ringing faintly in your skull. The same beam you forget exists every single night. You curse under your breath, already knowing who the culprit is before your eyes adjust. You try to ignore it. You bury your face in the straw, but that only earns you a nose full of hay and something that might be a beetle, its legs brushing against your upper lip. The screaming continues, followed by a crash. Then someone yells, "You said you were barren." So it's that kind of night. You sit up, eyes blurry, heart pounding like you've just survived a siege. You consider going back to sleep, but the odds of that now rank somewhere between unlikely and only if someone hits you with a lute. The candle is out. The air is cold, damp creeping into your sleeves. Somewhere in the darkness, Robert the rat is chewing something that sounds suspiciously like fabric. Probably your good shift. You get up, wrap yourself in your cloak, more patch than cloth, and poke your head into the hallway. Beatrice is sitting cross-legged at the end of the corridor, eating a turnip like it's an apple, and watching the chaos unfold with all the concern of a cow chewing cud. The turnip's crunch echoes faintly in the dim hallway, its earthy smell mixing with the sour tang of spilled ale drifting up from below. I give it 5 more minutes, she says, gesturing to the brawl. Then someone gets slapped with a candlestick. You nod, sigh, and return to your bed. The mattress prickles against your legs as you lower yourself. Dreams are clearly off the menu tonight, but if you're lucky, the madness will quiet soon. And maybe, just maybe, Robert will leave your sock alone. Dawn peeks through the shutters like a nosy neighbour with terrible timing. It's not golden or gentle. It's grey, cold, and smells faintly of mildew and regret. The scent curling in from the alley where damp stone and old wood. You sit up slowly, because moving too quickly might remind your spine that it's been used as a springboard for a merchant with no rhythm. The straw mattress has left another series of lines across your cheek. Medieval embroidery, courtesy of poverty. The hallway is quieter now. No more screaming. No more duck-related allegations. Just the muffled sound of someone snoring in the pantry and the distant splash of a chamber pot being emptied into the alley, followed by the faint, resigned sigh of whoever tossed it. The tanners are already at work. The stench wafts in politely uninvited, a dense, meaty odour with a bite of ammonia that wraps around your throat. Time to clean. The back room is a battlefield. The sheets are in a state of emergency, twisted and stiff in places. The candle wax has dripped into someone's boot, hardening like pale amber, and the only thing that smells worse than the bed is the pillow. There's a single coin wedged in a floorboard crack. Your tip from Sir Gilbert the Moist, who apparently thought subtlety involved hiding his money like a squirrel. You gather the linens and haul them downstairs to the washtub, where Marjorie is already elbow deep in misery. She's humming a folk song about drowning a cheating husband, her voice steady and low over the splash of water. You respect the feel. The water is cold, the kind that makes your fingers ache almost instantly. You scrub like a woman trying to erase memories, not stains. For the wine from the bishop's nephew is clinging to the fabric like sin, dark and stubborn. Someone's lost earring floats to the top, spinning slowly. It's not yours. You pocket it anyway. Beatrice wanders by with a broom and a look that says she's mentally on a ship to Venice, her sweeping absent and half-hearted. A madam is tallying up last night's earnings, muttering curses at the ink that won't flow, or perhaps just life in general. Someone burned breakfast again. The bread is hard enough to qualify as a weapon, the smell of charred crust hanging in the air. By the time you're done scrubbing, your fingers are numb, and your soul has officially detached for a brief vacation. You hang the linens on a line that's seen more flapping than a flock of pigeons during mating season. The sun rises higher. The city begins to stir. Another day looms. You look at the beds, now cleanish, the floor mostly swept. Your face in a cracked mirror, same as always. Ready or not, the door will open again soon, and someone will ask for something exotic. The linens are hung, the floor swept, and your hands smell faintly of lie and disappointment. The sun is officially up now, which means the real work, the pretending, the smiling, the endless parade of men who think calling you matey makes it romantic, is just around the corner. You've slept for maybe 2 hours. Your hair is a bird's nest, tangles catching the weak morning light. Your back aches like you've been trampled by a particularly clumsy mule, but you're upright. Your bodice is mostly laced, and you found a cleanish scarf to tie around your hair. That's what past. Gertrude is snoring in a chair, head tilted at an angle that suggests mild possession. Beatrice is poking at her latest flea bite, like it personally insulted her. You eat a crust of bread with hard cheese and a fig that's seen better centuries. You sip something warm that might be tea or might be yesterday's water, reheated with hope. It burns your throat. You drink it anyway. And then you do the one thing they never expect from a woman like you. You laugh just once, quiet and sharp. It's a new day, and someone somewhere is about to make a very weird request. You'll be ready. In the ancient Persian world, scent was far more than personal indulgence. It was spiritual alchemy. To walk into a Persian garden or palace was to enter a world saturated with fragrance. The very air was considered sacred. And so, the Persians made sure it carried the scent of roses, saffron, jasmine, and myrrh. They believed that a beautiful aroma was the signature of paradise, and earth was only tolerable when it mimicked heaven. Perfume in Persia wasn't just worn, it was lived. Bathhouses were infused with rose water steam. Mosques were sprinkled with incense before prayers. Even letters between lovers might be dusted with powdered ambergris or sprayed with attar, leaving a sensual whisper behind. This wasn't vanity, it was philosophy. Persians believed that the human soul was influenced by what the body absorbed, and that included smell. A good scent could calm the nerves, inspire poetry, or draw the attention of angels. A bad scent, meanwhile, was considered a moral failing. What's often forgotten in the West is that long before the French developed Chanel No. 5, the Persians had already mastered the art of distillation. They didn't just crush flowers and hope for the best. They engineered early Olympic stills, devices that used heat and condensation to extract the essence of plants. Copper vessels polished to a soft glow, their curved necks catching the light as steam curled upward like ghostly ribbons. The father of this technique, Avicenna, the legendary Persian polymath, is said to have worked in rooms perfumed by his experiments, each distillation releasing a new world of scent. His method for extracting rose essence laid the groundwork for modern perfumery, a careful alchemy of fire, water, and patience. But fragrance wasn't just the domain of scientists and royalty. Street vendors sold small vials of rose oil and orange blossom water from hand-woven baskets, their contents glinting in the morning sun. Traveling merchants carried musk from Tibet, frankincense from Arabia, ambergris from the Indian Ocean, their scents mingling with spices and dust in the crowded bazaars. It was a sensual economy, built not just on luxury, but on the Persian philosophy that beauty and scent were necessary for a balanced life. To the Persians, fragrance wasn't an accessory, it was identity. It defined how you entered a room, how you were remembered, and how you expressed your presence, both to the living and to the divine. A scent could bless, seduce, or heal. And if your perfume lingered in the air long after you'd left, that wasn't just chemistry, that was immortality. If there's one scent that defines Persian perfumery, it was a sensual economy, built not just on luxury, but on the Persian philosophy that beauty and scent were necessary for a balanced life. To the Persians, fragrance wasn't an accessory, it was identity. It defined how you entered a room, how you were remembered, and how you expressed your presence, both to the living and to the divine. A scent could bless, seduce, or heal, and if your perfume lingered in the air long after you'd left, that wasn't just chemistry, that was immortality. If there's one scent that defines Persian perfumery, it's rose, specifically the Damascus rose, cultivated in the mountainous regions of Iran for centuries. But Persians didn't simply crush petals and rub them on their skin. They sought purity, the very soul of the flower, and they invented the means to extract it. The breakthrough came with steam distillation. His technique revolutionized the way scent was captured. Instead of mashing petals into oil or steeping them in wine, Avicenna's method involved gently heating rose petals with water, then collecting the vapor rich with aromatic compounds. That vapor condensed into rose water, golab, a fragrant elixir that soon became one of Persia's most precious exports. Rosewater wasn't just for perfuming the body. It was sprinkled in homes, poured into fountains, so the water itself breathed fragrance, stirred into food and drink, and offered to guests as a sign of welcome. It cooled the skin, refreshed the spirit, and was believed to protect against disease, both physical and spiritual. In Sufi mysticism, rosewater symbolized divine love, and its use in ritual cleansing ceremonies echoed this deeper meaning. But rose wasn't the only star. The same distillation method was used to capture the fleeting breath of orange blossoms, the sweet powder of jasmine, the herbal sharpness of lavender, and even the bitterness of wild mountain herbs. The goal was always the same: to create a scent that could do more than smell good. It had to speak to the heart, uplift the soul, and bring the body into balance. This wasn't a quick job either. Harvesting roses had to be done at dawn, when the petals were richest in oils and the air still cool enough to hold their fragrance. Workers, often entire families, would gather the blossoms by hand, their fingertips brushed soft by the velvety petals. Within hours, the harvest was loaded into copper stills. The distillation itself was a slow, meditative task, more sacred than industrial. Persian cities like Kashan, Shiraz, and Isfahan became legendary for their perfume artisans. Travelers came from as far as India, Byzantium, and the Arab world to witness the rose festivals and buy pure attars. Some swore that a single drop of Persian rose oil on a silk handkerchief could retain its fragrance for decades. Persians didn't just bottle scent, they bottled emotion, memory, and beauty itself. To the Persians, fragrance was more than pleasure. It was prayer. From royal ceremonies to everyday devotions, scent played a central role in rituals both sacred and secular. The air of a Persian home wasn't complete without a gentle haze of oud, smoke, frankincense, or myrrh curling through the halls like invisible silk. And this wasn't just to impress guests. It was believed that pleasant aromas could summon divine favor and ward off evil. In Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion of ancient Persia before the Islamic period, fragrance was an offering to Ahura Mazda, the supreme god. Fires were kept burning in temples, not only for light and warmth, but for purification. Into these flames, sanctify this space and carry prayers upward. The smoke was considered a holy vehicle, transporting the faithful's words to the divine. When Islam took root in Persia, the role of scent only deepened. The Prophet Muhammad himself praised perfume as one of life's blessings, and Persian scholars and traders quickly became masters of incense blending. Mosques were perfumed before Friday prayers, and personal hygiene, including the use of fragrance, became both a spiritual and social duty. But these rituals weren't confined to temples or palaces. In daily Persian life, scent marked beginnings and endings. Births were celebrated with rosewater. Weddings were bathed in the aroma of orange blossom. The dead were wrapped in perfumed shrouds. Even books and prayer beads were sometimes anointed with delicate oils, because down through families. Women in particular curated their own secret blends of woods, resins, and spices, each with a purpose: to calm the mind, attract a lover, or clear bad energy. These weren't just perfumes. They were intentions, wafting through the air like invisible prayers. So, whether through rosewater sprinkled at dawn, or sacred smoke drifting through a twilight courtyard, the Persians didn't just fill their lives with scent. Silk drapes were perfumed, floors were sprinkled with rose water, Even ink used in royal decrees was sometimes scented with saffron or sandalwood. For a Persian Shah, smelling good wasn't a luxury, it was a statement. His body, his clothes, even the cushions on his throne had to exude divinity. Subjects believed that a ruler's scent revealed his moral character. A fragrant king was one blessed by the heavens, a foul-smelling one clearly cursed. Royal perfumers were held in the highest esteem. These were not simple apothecaries. They were chemists, poets, and confidants. They worked behind thick velvet curtains, surrounded by crushed petals, copper stills, and scrolls of ancient formulas. Their job was to compose signature scents for each member of the royal family, an invisible crown worn in the air. Perfumed gifts were also instruments of diplomacy. Persian ambassadors would present foreign courts with vials of exotic scent, wrapped in silk and tied with golden thread, a gesture of sophistication and subtle dominance. Here, the gift seemed to say, is a whiff of civilization. But the crown jewel of Persian court fragrance was the Rose Festival of Kashan. During this annual event, court ladies walked through the rose fields at dawn, skirts brushing dew-damp petals, gathering blooms for fresh distillation. The rose water from this ceremony was reserved for the royal household, a liquid luxury so rare that a single vial might be worth more than gold. In Persian court life, fragrance didn't just sweeten the air. It defined identity, announced power, and cloaked ambition in the delicate veil of flowers. In Persian poetry and romance, scent was the first kiss. Before a lover spoke, their arrival was marked by a breath of jasmine, rose, or amber, a trail that lingered like a secret. In a culture where modesty often restrained physical expression, perfume became the most intimate language of desire, and those who mastered it could seduce without ever touching. Lovers exchanged vials of perfume as others might exchange rings or letters. A single drop behind the ear, on the wrist, or hidden in the folds of a veil could speak volumes. Women wore oud and jasmine oil that, after hours of scrubbing, steaming, and exfoliating, men and women emerged into cool rooms where attendants applied fragrant oils with slow, rhythmic movements. The body became a canvas. Rose oil for softness, civet for mystery, clove and cardamom to warm the blood. Poets like Hafez and Rumi filled their verses with perfume metaphors. A beloved, not merely beautiful, but sweeter than musk. So fragrant the rose itself bowed in humility. To inhale a lover's scarf long after they'd gone was a holy longing. This olfactory seduction extended to clothing. Robes were perfumed using a technique called gilaf, in which garments were placed in wooden trunks filled with scented smoke. When worn, the fabric released its aroma slowly, like a whisper at close range. You could not bear skin, but you could leave a room fragrant enough to stir every imagination. And in that lingering trail, love bloomed, invisible, intoxicating, unforgettable. Behind every unforgettable Persian scent was a master of the invisible, the attar. These artisans were not mere vendors. They were chemists, herbalists, and poets rolled into one. Their knowledge passed down like heirloom jewels, in cramped, fragrant workshops tucked behind bazaars or nestled inside garden courtyards. They crafted emotions, drop by drop. The job required obsession. There was no fixed blueprint, only instinct, trial, and the memory of centuries. Every ingredient had its own temperament. Jasmine, shy, best blended at night. Saffron, temperamental, easily overpowering. Musk, the troublemaker, potent, erotic, and costly enough to start palace intrigues. Hay held the essence of rose, orange blossom, myrrh, cardamom, vetiver, coriander, even pomegranate skin or burnt almond shell. Each label, in delicate Persian script, bore not just a name, but a purpose, for the heart, for joy, to attract the beloved. Blending a perfume was as much ritual as recipe. The attar might begin with a grounding bass note, oud perhaps, then add floral or spicy middle tones. The final touch was a top note designed to dazzle in the first breath, citrus peel. A sliver of mint. Formulas were rarely written down. They lived in the perfumer's body like music, muscle memory guiding the hand. Nobles and poets sometimes commissioned custom scents for their own moods, seasons, or heartbreaks. Make me a perfume for forgetting, one might say. Or, I want to smell like spring on the edge of a storm. The attar would nod, vanish behind a curtain, step into a Persian bazaar, and your senses are seized at once. Colour, sound, and above all, scent. The marketplace wasn't only for spices, silks, or silver. It was a living museum of perfume. Fragrances floated on the air like gossip, leading you from stall to stall. Vendors sat between spice merchants and apothecaries, their shelves lined with glass flasks in every hue. In the quiet heart of the Persian bazaar, the day began not with shouting, but with fragrance. Even before the sun was warm on the cobblestones, the air was already rich, a gentle weave of rose, sandalwood, and jasmine drifting between shaded stalls. Travellers from Arabic, Indian, and European lands wrote of these markets as if they were dreams made solid. Places where perfumes were weighed like gold, and each shop felt like a sanctuary for the senses. It was not only a place to buy and sell. For many, visiting the perfume stalls was a weekly ritual of renewal. Elders sought the grounding embrace of cedar and oud. Young men leaned toward bright, spiced oils that lingered warmly in the air. brides-to-be stood before rows of glass vials, breathing in jasmine and rose until the future itself. And always, amid the gentle hum of voices, there was a small, still moment. A merchant dabbing a drop on a wrist, a slow inhale, and for the length of a single breath, the world seemed lighter, more forgiving. Long before perfume was sealed in bottles and set in bright windowed shops, Persian scholars were studying it like a delicate equation. To them, fragrance was a bridge between the seen and unseen, between the outer life and the inner self. It belonged as much to the realm of alchemy and medicine as it did to beauty. In the serene flowering of the medieval Islamic Golden Age, the most gifted minds wore many titles. A physician could also be an astronomer, a poet, and a perfumer. Among them was Avicenna, the quiet master whose rosewater distillations shaped the art for centuries to come. To Avicenna, scent was more than pleasure. Rosewater, these were not idle beliefs, but careful remedies, recorded and shared like precious seeds carried across lands. The Persian word for alchemy, chemia, meant transformation, the turning of one thing into another. In perfume, this transformation was gentle magic. Petals gathered in dawn's cool air, becoming a drop of their purest soul. The work was approached with reverence, as if each vessel of oil held a prayer. Inside the shaded still rooms, the air was warm with the faint breath of flowers. Copper stills gleamed in the half-light. Water simmered patiently, carrying vapor to spiral through slender coils before it fell, cooled, into waiting jars. Students learned to listen to scent as much as measure it, to know which notes would rise and vanish quickly, like citrus after rain, and which would stay low and lingering, like amber at dusk. Slowly, science did not strip the soul from fragrance. It gave it a steadier form. Scholars wrote of how a single scent could still the mind before prayer, or bring the body into quiet accord with the heart. Kings patronized such experiments, eager for the meeting of luxury and learning. In this, Persia offered the world something enduring, a perfumed tradition that was not fleeting ornament, but a kind of gentle strength. And so, every drop of attar became more than a scent. It was a slow distillation of gardens, markets, whispered devotions, and the patience of hands. When it touched the skin, it carried not only its fragrance, but the unhurried weight of centuries, lingering like a soft breath in the air, long after the moment had passed. In the bustling heart of medieval Persia, magnificent scent markets flourished as centers of aromatic wonder. Foreign travelers and merchants from distant lands wrote extensively about these extraordinary bazaars, comparing them to mystical realms where fragrances held the same precious value as gold itself. Each vendor's stall resembled a sacred temple dedicated to the art of luxury and sensual pleasure. These aromatic marketplaces transcended mere commercial spaces. They served as cultural gathering points where people engaged in weekly traditions, refreshing their signature scents, selecting thoughtful presents for family members, or simply standing in reverent appreciation of the intoxicating aromas that filled the air. Elderly patrons gravitated toward deep, earthy wooden essences that provided spiritual grounding. Young gentlemen sought out bold, fiery spice combinations designed. Soon-to-be brides carefully collected precious jasmine and rose oils for their upcoming celebrations. Within the chaotic energy of these bustling markets, there existed moments of pure tranquility. A single drop applied to the wrist, a deep inhalation, and suddenly the entire world transformed into something heavenly and divine. Long before the era of elegant glass bottles and sophisticated retail boutiques, Persian scholars approached the study of scent with the rigor and precision of true scientific inquiry. Persia's revolutionary contributions to the perfume industry extended far beyond cultural and artistic influences. They established the very foundations of modern chemistry and fragrance creation. The sophisticated craft of perfume production became intimately connected with the ancient practices of alchemy, traditional medicine, and early pharmaceutical sciences. During the remarkable Islamic golden age of medieval times, many of history's most brilliant intellectual figures wore multiple hats, serving simultaneously as respected physicians, renowned astronomers, and master perfumers. At the forefront of this revolutionary movement stood Avicenna, the legendary Persian polymath, whose groundbreaking work during the 10th and 11th centuries forever changed the world of fragrance. His innovative experiments with steam distillation techniques, particularly his meticulous studies involving rose petals, established the fundamental methods still used today for extracting pure essential oils from botanical sources. Avicenna viewed fragrance creation as far more than simple indulgence or vanity. He recognized the profound therapeutic potential contained within carefully crafted scents. How saffron-based attar formulations were believed to combat melancholy and depression, and how musk preparations were prescribed to stimulate and strengthen cardiovascular function. These weren't mere folk superstitions or unfounded beliefs. They represented carefully studied therapeutic treatments, thoroughly documented in scholarly texts that spread throughout the Islamic world and eventually influenced European medical practices. The Persian terminology for alchemy, chemia, described the mystical process of transforming one substance into another entirely different form. Within the realm of perfumery, this transformation carried profound spiritual significance as well as scientific importance. The ability to take a simple handful of delicate flower petals and transform them into a single precious drop of concentrated essence was considered nothing short of miraculous. Early Persian scientists approached this process with the same reverence and dedication they applied to the legendary pursuit of turning base metals into pure gold. Sophisticated perfume laboratories, often strategically attached to prestigious madrasas, educational institutions, or important hospitals, utilized complex glass apparatus for advanced distillation and precise filtration processes. This accumulated knowledge evolved into a sophisticated classification system, the famous fragrance pyramid, featuring top notes, middle notes, and base notes that modern perfumers continue to utilize today. Rather than diminishing the spiritual and emotional aspects of scent creation, scientific advancement actually elevated and enhanced them. Persian scholars wrote extensively about how properly formulated fragrances could clear mental fog before important prayers or create perfect harmony between physical body and spiritual essence. Even powerful rulers and wealthy patrons actively supported and funded scientific perfume experiments, eager to discover new ways of blending material luxury with intellectual discovery and advancement. Through this remarkable fusion of rigorous scientific methodology and romantic artistic expression, ancient Persia gifted the world something truly extraordinary, a perfume tradition that refused to categorize fragrance as frivolous or exclusively feminine, but instead established it as genuinely formidable. Persian perfumery stood proudly at the intersection of advanced medicine, mystical spirituality, and precise mathematics. Every single drop of carefully crafted attar represented not merely the distillation of beautiful flowers, but the concentrated essence of centuries of accumulated human knowledge, wisdom, and cultural refinement. Though mighty empires rise and eventually fall throughout history, certain legacies possess the remarkable ability to persist and cling to the very winds of time itself. The ancient Persian perfume tradition, originally born in magnificent palace gardens, refined within royal courts, and perfected inside scholarly laboratories, continues to... You can easily discover its distinctive fingerprints throughout every corner of the modern perfume world. From the most exclusive luxury French perfume houses to humble street-side attar vendors found throughout South Asia and the Middle East. If any contemporary fragrance bottle contains rose, oud, jasmine, or precious saffron, there's an excellent chance it carries whispered echoes of ancient Persian aromatic traditions and time-honored techniques. The revolutionary methods that Persian master artisans developed and refined over centuries, including steam distillation, sophisticated scent layering, and precise oil blending, became the unshakable foundations upon which all modern perfumery continues to build. Western scholars eagerly translated precious Persian texts focused on botanical sciences and alchemical practices. Avicenna's groundbreaking rose water extraction methodology was carefully replicated throughout Italy, France, and eventually influenced the entire global cosmetics industry. Even today's most innovative niche perfume creators frequently borrow directly from ancient Persian formulas, proudly describing their contemporary creations as inspired by the rose gardens of Shiraz, or blended according to the time-honored traditions of ancient Persia. The influence of Persian perfumery extends far beyond mere scientific and technical contributions. It encompasses a profound emotional and philosophical legacy as well. The distinctly Persian philosophy of fragrance as a sophisticated form of prayer, poetry, and personal identity continues to endure and thrive in modern times. Throughout contemporary Iran, it remains completely normal and expected to offer to delicately perfume prayer mats before religious observances, and to carefully scent new clothing before important wedding celebrations. The vibrant bazaar culture remains vibrantly alive, with modern attars sold in tiny bottles capped with gold, each one intimately connected to personal memory, emotional mood, and deeper spiritual meaning. You can still discover dedicated artisans working in the historic city of Kashan, who rise before dawn to gather precious damask roses, following exactly the same traditional methods their ancestors practiced over 1,000 years ago. The annual Golabgiri festival, a joyous celebration of rose distillation, attracts thousands of visitors from around the world each year. All Persian households continue to carry these ancient traditions forward with pride and dedication. Perfume remains an integral part of storytelling and cultural identity. A grandmother lovingly dabs rose water behind her ears before family gatherings. A mother carefully spritzes orange blossom before joyous celebrations. A child grows up with the fundamental belief that to smell beautiful is to be properly prepared for joy, for prayer, and for life itself. In the final analysis, Persia's extraordinary perfume legacy cannot be simply bottled, packaged, or contained within physical objects. Instead, it continues to be breathed, experienced, and lived by countless people around the world, passed lovingly from hand to hand, heart to heart. This remarkable tradition steadfastly refuses to fade away or diminish with time. Like a single precious drop of attar, carefully applied, it lingers eternally. Subtle yet seductive, sacred yet sensual, timeless and absolutely eternal. The ancient Persian masters didn't merely create perfumes, they created an enduring philosophy of beauty, spirituality, and human connection that continues to inspire and influence fragrance lovers worldwide in 2025 and beyond. Prior to the transformative waters of 988 CE, before the construction of religious practice seamlessly wove itself into the fabric of everyday existence, with each natural phenomenon possessing its own distinct personality and divine name. Lightning strikes represented Perun, the mighty god of thunder and warfare, essentially the Slavic equivalent of mighty Zeus. Mother Earth herself embodied a nurturing feminine spirit, eternally fertile and watchfully protective. The dense forests teemed with supernatural creatures, both tangible and imagined, capable of offering protection or delivering swift punishment. This wasn't merely some peripheral belief system practiced by isolated communities. Paganism throughout Kievan Rus operated as a sophisticated and seriously structured religious framework. Each distinct tribe maintained unique ritual practices and guardian spirits, yet certain powerful deities commanded universal reverence. Perun dominated the pantheon's summit, received Ashbog, the radiant sun deity, symbolized abundant life and prosperity. Veles, governing cattle, commercial trade, and the mysterious underworld, earned beloved status among farmers and merchant communities alike. These divine beings didn't reside within constructed temples, but inhabited sacred natural spaces, holy groves, flowing rivers, and elaborately carved idols positioned at important crossroads and elevated hilltops. Religious ceremonies included communal feasting, rhythmic music, constructing an impressive pantheon of pagan deities atop a prominent Kiev hill, with mighty Perun positioned at the ceremonial center. Sacred offerings were regularly presented, elaborate rituals performed with precision, and Vladimir, known during this period more for his earthly appetites than theological sophistication, hoped to utilize religion as an effective tool of political governance and social control. However, this approach proved ultimately unsuccessful. Despite its spiritual power, paganism lacked the centralized authority structure necessary for effective state building. The belief system remained too fragmented across tribal lines, too locally focused. More problematically, it caused Kievan Rus to appear uncivilized and backward in the eyes of the great contemporary empires, mighty Byzantium, the expanding Islamic caliphates. If Vladimir truly desired political legitimacy, profitable trade alliances, and international diplomatic prestige, he required something far more sophisticated than traditional thunder gods and ceremonial goat sacrifices. Vladimir approached religious conversion not as a spiritual seeker, but as a shrewd political strategist executing a carefully calculated business transaction. Around 986 CE, he began systematically evaluating proposals from the world's major religious traditions, not from personal devotion, but as a ruler seeking to upgrade his state's international standing and internal organization. Following the practical approach of any experienced leader, he dispatched official envoys to thoroughly examine the religious practices of neighboring powers and report back with detailed assessments. Representatives first investigated Islam as practiced by the vulgar Bulgars to the east, while acknowledging its monotheistic discipline and widespread influence. They identified one fundamental obstacle that completely eliminated this possibility: the prohibition against alcohol consumption meant there is no joy, the envoys reported. Vladimir, renowned for his legendary drinking habits, allegedly declared with finality, "Drinking represents the fundamental joy of the Rus people. We cannot possibly exist without it." Islam was immediately dismissed. Next, his ambassadors visited Latin Christians in Germanic territories. While recognizing the religion's obvious political power, they found the ceremonial aspects disappointingly mundane. "We witnessed no beauty there," they reported with clear lack of enthusiasm. The envoys then traveled to examine the Khazars who followed Mosaic law. However, their apparent lack of a permanent homeland seemed ominous to Vladimir, who posed the decisive question: "If your God has rejected and abandoned you, how could I possibly worship him?" Finally, the diplomatic mission reached Constantinople. There, within the breathtaking magnificence of Hagia Sophia, they experienced the Eastern Orthodox liturgy in its full ceremonial splendor. Aromatic incense rising toward heaven, angelic choirs echoing beneath gleaming golden mosaics, clergy adorned like earthly emperors conducting divine services. The envoys returned completely mesmerized. Vladimir felt convinced, but not due to personal piety, rather because orthodoxy offered what paganism never could provide: genuine imperial legitimacy, widespread international recognition, and realistic opportunities for achieving true greatness. However, Vladimir demanded one additional condition before finalizing his conversion: marriage to a Byzantine princess, specifically Anna Porphyrogenita, sister of the reigning emperors Basil II and Constantine VIII. When this request was initially declined, Vladimir responded with characteristic directness by invading Crimea in 988 CE, besieging the Byzantine outpost of Chersonesos. Once the city surrendered to his forces, he sent an unmistakable message to Constantinople: "Provide the princess and receive your territory back." The strategy succeeded perfectly. The Byzantines, facing internal revolts and desperately needing military assistance. Following his personal baptism in the very city he had conquered, Vladimir returns to Kiev and initiated one of history's most dramatic religious transformations. He commanded the destruction of all pagan idols throughout the city, most memorably the great statue of Perun, which was tied with ropes, beaten by soldiers, and ceremoniously dragged through the streets before being cast into the Dnieper River. Then Vladimir issued a revolutionary decree. The entire population of Kiev, men, women, and children, must gather on the riverbanks for mass baptism. This wasn't an invitation or suggestion. It represented a direct royal command. Orthodox priests positioned themselves along the water's edge. Liturgical chants filled the air. Sacred icons were raised high, and thousands of bewildered citizens were led into the flowing waters. For most participants, this marked their first encounter with Christian liturgy, experienced through cold river water and imperial chants they couldn't understand. Yet something truly profound occurred during this mass ceremony. Whether through fear, awe, or social momentum, the people submitted to this spiritual transformation. A new religious identity was being forged, not through individual persuasion, but through collective immersion in the sacred waters. Before Vladimir's dramatic conversion, another remarkable figure had already begun laying the groundwork for Christian Rus. Princess Olga of Kiev, one of the most formidable women in all of Slavic history. Born around 890 CE in the northern town of Pskov, Olga married Igor of Kiev and became deeply involved in the brutal realities of early medieval statecraft. When Igor was killed in 945 CE by the Drevlian tribe during a tribute collection gone wrong, brutally executed by being tied between two bent birch trees and torn apart, Olga faced a critical choice. Rather than remarrying for protection or stepping aside as expected, she seized absolute control and orchestrated one of history's most methodical campaigns of vengeance. When Drevlian nobles arrived, proposing she marry their Prince Mal to make peace, Olga graciously accepted their proposal and suggested they enjoy a traditional bath before the ceremony. Once they entered the bathhouse, she ordered the doors barred and the buildings set ablaze, burning every man alive. She invited additional Drevlian ambassadors to Kiev under pretense of formal acceptance. During a grand feast, once they were thoroughly intoxicated, her soldiers systematically slaughtered them all. Marching on the Drevlian capital of Iskoristan, Olga besieged the city. When traditional warfare proved insufficient, she employed psychological warfare of legendary cunning. She requested a modest tribute from each household, merely 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. The desperate defenders, relieved by this seemingly reasonable demand, eagerly complied. Unknown to them, Olga's forces had attached burning sulfur and cloth to each bird's legs. When released, the birds instinctively flew back to their nests in the city's thatched roofs, instantly setting the entire settlement ablaze. As people fled the flames, Olga's army captured or killed them systematically. Despite her brutal beginnings, Princess Olga underwent a profound transformation during a diplomatic mission to Constantinople in the 950s. There she was baptized with great ceremony, taking the Christian name Helena. However, she returned to a still pagan court where even her son Sviatoslav refused conversion, fearing it would appear weak to his warriors. Olga never forced Christianity upon her people. Instead, she practiced a patient, strategic approach, inviting missionaries and personally demonstrating Christian faith while allowing others to maintain their traditional beliefs. She understood that lasting change required time and careful cultivation rather than coercion. When she died in 969 CE, Olga was later canonized as Saint Olga, equal to the apostles, not for martyrdom, but for her visionary role in laying the spiritual foundations that her grandson Vladimir would eventually build upon. She had literally paved the path for the Christianization of Kievan Rus through patient example and strategic foresight. Vladimir's baptism of 988 CE wasn't merely a one-time religious ceremony. It initiated a centuries-long integration of faith and political power that would define not only Rus, but the entire Eastern Slavic world for generations to come. The Orthodox Church evolved beyond a simple religious institution to become the very soul of the state itself. Bishops provided counsel to princes. Monasteries held extensive lands and trained administrative scribes. Religious processions replaced ancient tribal rituals, and even military banners displayed crosses instead of traditional animal totems. The fundamental concept of civilization within Rus became intimately connected to Christian identity, deliberately modelled after great Orthodox centres like Constantinople. However, this close relationship came with significant costs, as the Church grew dependent upon princes for protection. Rulers increasingly used religious authority to reinforce their own political legitimacy. Even when Kievan Rus later fragmented and eventually fell under Mongol domination, Orthodox faith remained remarkably resilient. It served as a cultural anchor during foreign occupation, preserving historical memory, language, and belief systems when political structures crumbled around it. The metropolitan seat relocated from Kiev to Vladimir, then eventually to Moscow, which would ultimately claim the prestigious title of Third Rome. Especially significant after Constantinople's fall to Ottoman forces in 1453. The Christianization of Kievan Rus in 988 CE represented far more than a single ruler's religious conversion. It marked the beginning of an Orthodox civilization that would survive warfare, invasion, and empire building across many centuries. Saint Vladimir's legacy flowed directly from that transformative moment on the Dnieper riverbank, when an entire civilization's spiritual identity was ceremonially submerged and reborn. Princess Olga's patient groundwork and Vladimir's decisive action together created a religious and cultural foundation that continues influencing Eastern Europe today. From the vengeful pagan princess who burned cities with birds, to the calculating prince who chose faith as foreign policy. These remarkable figures demonstrated that sometimes the most profound spiritual transformations emerge not from mystical revelation, but from practical wisdom, political necessity, and the patient cultivation of lasting change.